Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, everybody seems to be okay with it.
Okay. All right, then. Well, let's go ahead and just get straight to it. And of course, Shabbat Shalom for the second time tonight. And happy to have Michael here with me. And I know that he's got a lot of great material. What I'll do is I'll try to kind of limit down a little bit, kind of shave it down a little bit, just for time wise. But Michael, I'm going to let you take it away. Start reading. We are in Genesis 25, I think it is. And go ahead and read and start giving your commentary, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And please don't limit. Please, I'll be fine. I was worried about you Easterners. Okay, so let's see, Genesis Targum 25. I posted in the chat. Hopefully Josh has it up. And let's go. So Abraham added and took a wife, and her name was Keturah. She is Hagar, who had been bound to him from the beginning. And she bare to him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Yishbak, Shovak. Jokshan begat Shiva and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were merchants and negotiators and chiefs of people. And the sons of Midian, Iphar and Epher and Honok and Abida and Aldiah, all these were the sons of Keturah. And Abraham gave the gift of all he had to Ishak. And to the sons of the concubines of Abraham gave Abraham riches and movable property as gifts, and sent them away from Ishak his son while he yet lived. And they went and dwelt eastward in the land of the Orient. And this is the number of the days of life of Abraham, who lived 175 years. And Abraham expired and died in a good old age, aged and satisfied with all good. Also Ishmael wrote repentance in his days, and afterward was gathered to his people. And Ishak and Ishmael's his sons buried him in the double cavern at the field of Ephron bar Zochar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. The field that Abraham purchased of the sons of Hittah, there was Abraham buried and Sarah his wife. And because Abraham had not designed to bless Ishmael, therefore he blessed not Isaac, for he blessed Isaac and not Ishmael. It would have kept them in enmity. But after the death of Abraham, the Lord blessed Ishak, and Ishak dwelt near the well at which was revealed the glory of the living and eternal one, who seeth and is not seen. And these are the generations of Ishmael bar Abraham, whom Hagar the Mitzrayite, and the handmaid of Sarah bare unto Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names, according to the generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebo, and Arab, and Abdil, and Mishsham, hearing, silence, patience, and sharpness. And Tamah, Yator, Nephish, Kedema. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names in their villages and in their fenced dwellings, 12 chiefs of their people. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he was converted in repentance and expired, and was gathered to his people. And they dwelt from Hindiki unto Chalutza, which is in the face of Mitzrayim, from going up to Athor. Before the face of all his brethren he dwelt in his possession. These are the generations of Ishak bar Abraham. And because the appearance of Ishak resembled the appearance of Abraham, the sons of men saith, in truth Abraham begat Ishak. And Ishak was the son of 40 years when he took Rivkah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramite, who was of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramite, unto him for a wife. And Ishak went to the mountain of worship, the place where his father had bound him. And Ishak in his prayer turned the attention to the Holy One, blessed be he, from that which he had decreed respecting his wife, because she had been barren 22 years. And changed also was the intention of the Holy One, blessed be he, from that which he had decreed concerning him who had been childless. And he was enlarged, and Rivkah his wife was with child. And the children pressed in her womb as men doing battle. And she said, if this is the anguish of a mother, what then are children to me? And she went into the school of Shem Rabbah to supplicate mercy before the Lord. And the Lord said to her, two peoples are in thy womb, and two kingdoms from thy womb shall be separated, and one king shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger, if the children of the younger will keep the commandments of the law. And the 270 days of her being with child were completed to bring forth, and behold, twins were in her womb. And the first came forth wholly red as a garment of hair, and they called his name Esau, because he was born altogether complete, with the hair of the head, and the beard, and the teeth, and the grinders. Afterward came forth his brother, and his hand had hold on the heel of Esau, and he called his name Jacob or Yaakov. And Ishak was son of 60 years when he begat them. And the lads grew, and Esau was a man of idleness, to catch birds and beasts, a man going forth into the field to kill lives, as Nimrod had killed, and Hanok his son. But Jacob was a man peaceful in his works, a minister of the instruction house of Eber, seeking instruction before the Lord. And Ishak loved Esau, for the words of deceit were in his mouth. But Rivkah loved Jacob. On the day that Abraham died, Jacob dressed pottage of lentils and was going to comfort his father. And Esau came from the wilderness exhausted, for in that day he had committed 5 transgressions. He had worshipped with strange worship. He had shed innocent blood. He had gone into an unbetrothed or betrothed damsel. He had denied the life of the world to come and despised the birthright. And Esau said to Jacob, let me now taste that red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore he called his name Edom. And Jacob said, sell to this day, as on this very day, what thou wouldest hereafter appropriate thy birthright unto me. And Esau said, behold, I am going to die, and in another world I shall have no life. And what then to me is the birthright, or the portion in the world of which thou speakest? And Jacob said, swear to me to the day, that so it shall be. And he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave Esau to bread and pottage of lentils, and he ate and drank, and arose and went. And Esau scorned the birthright and the portion of the world that cometh. So this is a juicy chapter. No, do you want first commentary? Or should
No, no, I've been talking for 2 hours. Take it away.
Okay. All right. So let's go here. So you guys notice, Torah was named as this wife. We talked about this a long time ago with Hagar. So it says, and Abraham added and took a wife, and her name was Keturah. She is Hagar, who had been bound to him from the beginning. So rabbinic commentary, and it kind of goes with this, that states Keturah and Hagar are the names for the same person, as the Targum here, whom Abraham remarried after initially expelling. So possible justifications for this opinion include the fact that Keturah is referred to in 1 Chronicles 132 as Abraham's concubine, and several other verses which suggest that the descendants of Hagar and Keturah lived in the same territory. Keturah, whose name means enveloped in fragrant smoke or incense. Now, I thought this was really cool. Were descended from the tribes of the Arabian desert. The meaning of her name reflects their occupation. They were merchants in the spice and incense trade. So Keturah's son Midian became the father of the Midianites, the people who offered Moses asylum after his escape from Egypt, and into whose tribe Moses married. This is also interesting. So it plays along with the Hagar part. So the name was said to be related to the Aramaic word ketur, Ketur, which means knot, Knot, to imply that she was bound and did not have sexual relations with anyone else from the time she left Abraham until her return. According to more tradition, she was a descendant of Noah's son Japheth. And then, however, this is Noah's nemesis. The Book of Jubilees supports the conclusion that they are not the same. They are two different people by stating that Abraham waited until Hagar's death before marrying Keturah. Okay, so number 2, she bare him Zimrah, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Yishbak, and Shovak. It's finding the name definitions. Let's see. Zimran, vine dresser, celebrated song, interesting, vine dresser. Jokshan, an offense, hardness, knocking. Midian, quarrel or fighting. Midian, judgment, covering. Ishbak, he will leave, leaving. Shua, ditch, swimming, humiliation. Some good, some bad. Interesting, huh? If those are the definitions of the names. So Abraham gave, number 5, sorry. He gave the gift of all, I'm emphasizing the all, he had to Ishak. So these are some different interpretations on that. I found he gave Isaac his birthright here. Abraham gave the power of the blessing granted to him in Genesis 12:2, which says, I will make you a great nation, I will bless you and make your name great, and so you should be a blessing. So they're saying he's transferring this blessing. Or Abraham gave the privilege of being buried in the cave of Machpelah and a deed of gift. And we'll get to that in a bit. What do you guys think? What did all he give him? Let's see. I'll do maybe 2 or 3 more. Number 6, Palestinian. It says, and to the sons of the concubines of Abraham gave Abraham riches and movable property as gifts. What is that? And sent them away from Ishak his son while he had yet lived. And they went and dwelled eastward in the land of the Orient. So it looks like the sons of Keturah went to China. What do you guys think about that? Commentary deduced from the plural of concubines here in this verse that Abraham had 2 concubines besides Sarah and Hagar, and thus, like Jacob, had 4 spouses. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Here's a commentary. The sons of Keturah to the east, like we just spoke about. Some have suggested that they carry the beliefs of Abraham with them, and that Moses later would meet Jethro, the high priest of the God Most High. Proof that the truth about the one of God has faithfully taught by his offspring. I'm going to do one more. This was a decent one. So, number 8 says, Then Abraham gave up the ghost, and he died in good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. So that word full is Proverbs 19, and I don't have the number, but it says, The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied. So that word full is satisfied, untouched by evil. So I would say Abraham accomplished this proverb. He feared the Lord, and that he went to sleep satisfied. And if you notice too, like, well, here's one more thing. So I saw a stat that Abraham was one of the most important men of the Bible. He was mentioned 70 times in the Old Testament alone. Only Moses is mentioned more times, 80. And then if you notice, he was full of years and was gathered to his people. So is this the first inclination to Sheol, or Abraham's bosom? We've talked about Abraham's bosom before, but this is kind of a summary. The bosom of Abraham refers to the place of comfort in the biblical Sheol, or Hades in the Greek Septuagint, where the righteous dead abide. The word found in the Greek text for bosom is kolpos, meaning lap or bay, which is interesting considering last week's show about Eleazar, or Lazarus, touching his thigh. So I found that very interesting. Both use bosom, and we talked about him. That was his covenant when he had to touch his lap or thigh. And then let's see. So this is probably one of my favorite chapters in Enoch. 22 talks about this cavern. So from thence I proceeded to another spot where I saw in the west a great and lofty mountain, a strong rock, 4 delightful places. Internally it was deep, capacious, and very smooth, as smooth as it had been rolled over. It was both deep and dark. Then Raphael, one of the holy angels who were with me, answered and said, These are the delightful places where the spirits, the souls of the dead, will be collected. For them were they formed, and here they'll be collected all the souls of the sons of men. These places in which they dwell shall they occupy until the day of judgment, and unto their appointed period. Their appointed period will be long, even until the great judgment. And I saw the spirit of the sons of men who were dead, and their voices reached to heaven while they were accusing. Then I inquired of Raphael, an angel who was with me, and said, Whose spirit is that? The voice of which reaches to heaven and accuses. He answered and said, This is the spirit of Abel, who was slain by Cain his brother, and who will accuse that brother until his seed be destroyed from the face of the earth, until his seed perish from the seed of the human race. At that time, therefore, I inquired respecting him and respecting the general judgment, saying, Why is one separated from another? He answered, 3 separations have been made between the spirits of the dead, and thus have the spirits of the righteous been separated. So the spirit of the righteous being separated is Abraham's bosom, and then appears there's 3 caverns of worse, of evil. Real quick, the Palestinian, Abraham expired and died in good old age, aged and satisfied with all good. And then it mentions Ishmael wrote repentance in his day. So it says he got back on track. He repented, and afterwards was gathered to his people. And then 2 more things. Isaac was 75 when his father died. That was Abraham's same age when he entered Canaan, and his 2 sons were 15 years old. So I thought that was interesting that when he died was the same age Abraham entered Canaan. And then finally, Abraham lived exactly 100 years in the land Yah promised. That has to be significant. Exactly 100 years. I'll hand it off to Nolan for his commentary.
Well, you were talking about Abraham's bosom, and that Eliezer touched his thigh, right? Well, and you were saying how like bosom means like lap or so on and so forth. Well, if I'm not mistaken, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, I think it was last week we were talking about Eliezer. It says in the Targum that touched his place of the circumcision. And we were kind of like, huh. Well, I'm just wondering now, after you gave that explanation, if the the place of the thigh or Abraham's bosom is a nice way of saying the place of circumcision, the place of the mark of the sign of the covenants. And I'm not talking about, of course, purely, as you guys know, physical circumcision, but a spiritual circumcision. I'm just curious about that now. I'm going to be thinking a lot about that. All right. So, as Michael pointed out, it says in verse 1 that, he adds to take a new wife. Her name was Keturah, and then the Aramaic Targum says she is Hagar. Now, I had that same question because if I'm not mistaken, again, the Aramaic Targum is the only place that claims that he handed Hagar like a bill of divorce or whatever. And that had my curiosity because when he sent her away, because he never really spends time with her again. He goes out to see Ishmael, but you don't really see her in the picture again. So I started looking this up, and I understand that some of the rabbinical traditions will hold to this. Well, the book of Jasher, it doesn't name, it doesn't say whether it's Hagar or not, his new wife Keturah, but it says this in Jasher 25:1. And it was at that time that Abraham again took a wife in his old age, and her name was Keturah from the land of Canaan. Well, wait a second here. Hagar wasn't from the land of Canaan. She was from the land of Egypt. If you recall, Hagar was the daughter of Pharaoh, according to multiple texts, the granddaughter of Nimrod. So then we read this in the writings of Abraham. Now, I'm not trying to just jump to the rescue of the writings of Abraham. But this is one of those occasions in the Targum where I'm like, I'm not sure I'm following this, that Hagar and Keturah are the same person. So this is what it says in the writings of Abraham. This same year, I took to wife Keturah, the daughter of mine old friend Abimelech, king of Gerar, who was dead. And then he goes on to describe Keturah bare me 6 sons, and so on and so forth. So right there, we're seeing a divergent. Now, the writings of Abraham makes more sense to me because we already read in Joshua that she's from the land of Canaan. And I'd have to refer to that passage in Jubilees, Michael, you talked about, which it gave another woman. I'd be curious to say if it gave more detail to who she is. I confess I did not look into Jubilees this week when looking into this. Now, something I am going to point out right here, since we're on the subject of Abimelech, and I will be probably maybe writing this up and kind of presenting this again in the future, so act surprised when I do. But as you guys recall, when I gave my Many Lives of Nimrod conversation or presentation like 2 weeks ago, I gave the theory in there that Nimrod, that nobody actually called him Nimrod. That was something the biblical writers did, and that there were a series of 3 to 4 different Nimrods that sprang up. And that's something we're going to be talking about a little bit more tonight because it is in this chapter, if we get that far tonight. And this is what Writings of Abraham, chapter 159 says. So in the same context, it says, Abimelech, son of Abimelech, reigneth now in the place of his father in Gerar, and he too is a mighty man of Elohim. All right, Abimelech, son of Abimelech. All right, now this is what it says in Yashar. And it was at the death of Abimelech that the people of Gerar took Ben Malach, his son. So Ben is for son of Malach, right? And he was only 20 years old, and they made him lying in the place of his father, and they called his name Abimelech, after the name of his father, for thus was it their custom to do so in Gerar. So there's another kind of point that I'm going to be bringing forward, that there was a series of Abimelechs. It wasn't just one. It was Abimelech, 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 Abimelech. We don't know how many. There was Pharaoh, 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 Pharaoh. We don't know how many, right? So same thing for Nimrod. Okay. The other thing that Michael already brought up in here is that it talks about how they went to the land of the Orient. that is really interesting. There was I'm trying to find it here in my notes. So there's a lot of notes here, and I can't find where it is now. But another passage referred to it as the mountain, which I thought that was interesting. I thought it was maybe, and I wish I had it in front of me now. Oh, it's driving me crazy. I thought I had it in here. I was under the impression that the mountain might be a reference to the Tower of Babel, the mountain, and which is also in the far east, east of even Babylon. But I think that this probably is a reference to China, maybe India, probably China though. And something that to think about with this is that I think we're going to maybe we might not get to it this week, or we will. When Abraham died, all those descendants that he sent out, they came back for the funeral. So if they went all the way out to China, I mean, someone want to do the math on that on the as the bird flies, the traveling distance, that would be weeks of travel. They went out there. Oh, he died. We're traveling weeks back to mourn at his funeral and then traveling way back. They're just something to think about. And I think I'm caught up to where you're at, Michael. So handing it back to you.
All right. Yeah, I stopped at 8. I don't know if that's where you stopped at, but okay. So let's see. So number 10, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, there was Abraham buried, Sarah's wife. So the tomb faced the oaks of Mamre, where Sarah and Abraham laughed with the three travelers. I thought that was interesting. Little tidbit there. Number 13. Now I'm going to start doing this more often because I think it helps you guys see it, the differences. And these are the names. And then the Palestinian has very similar names. And then it says hearing, silence, patience, and sharpness. I have no idea what they mean. Is that what these names mean? Are these additional sons named hearing? I doubt it. But so what do you guys think about that? Did they just define these names? Does Arab mean silence? I have no idea. But I thought that was interesting that the Targum said that. Number 19. I'm very back heavy, so I have a lot of stuff later on. These are the generations of Itzhak bar Abraham, and because the appearance of Itzhak resembled the appearance of Abraham, the sons of men said, "In truth, Abraham begot Itzhak." So that was interesting that he actually looked like his son. So what happened? Ishmael didn't look like Abraham. Basic structure. Let's see. So this says so. This is going forward. So usually, it's the same chapter or something like that. This is the only one of chapter 25, but at least it'll give you kind of a summary of what to expect as we continue this Targum series. So this part of the narrative begins with another chiastic pattern that will pivot on the birth of Joseph, the fourth central figure in the second half of Genesis. This chiastic pattern slightly overlaps the previous pattern beginning with the history of Isaac's family. So 25:19, that's why I started it here. So this is the beginning of the history of Isaac's descendants, birth of Esau and Jacob, divided and fighting against each other, encounter with Yahweh, and relationship with pagan neighbors, blessings sought and blessings given. Jacob flees from Esau, Esau's union marriage to an Ishmaelite woman, Jacob's encounter with Yah's messenger, Jacob's arrival in Haran and meeting with Laban, and Jacob acquires a family. And if you guys have learned, the middle is the part of the chiastic. So now you start looking at the left to the left. So now it's the birth of Joseph is the central figure. Jacob acquires wealth. Previously, he acquired a family. Jacob's departure from Haran and Laban, he arrived there. Jacob encounters a messenger. He encounters a messenger. He planned reunion with Esau. Jacob flees Esau. He prepares to meet Esau. Blessings sought and blessings given, same as above. Encounter with Esau in relationship with pagan neighbors, very similar. And the end of the history of Isaac, the 12 sons of Jacob and Isaac's death. Jacob and Esau united in peace to bury their father. So this is the start of this chiasm, but I thought it was interesting, a good summary. Since you did not talk that much, I don't want to get too far ahead of you. Let's see. I'll do one more at 21 and then give it back to you. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now look at this one. This is the Palestinian, if you guys are playing along here. Yitzhak went to the mountain of worship, the place where his father had bound him, and Yitzhak, in his prayer, turned the attention to the Holy One. Blessed be he from that which he had decreed respecting his wife, because she had been barren 20 and 2 years, and changed also was the intention of the Holy One. Blessed be he from that which he had decreed concerning him who had been childless, and he was enlarged, and Rivka his wife was a child. So a commentary taught that Rebekah was barren for 20 years. After 20 years, Isaac took Rebekah to Mount Moriah, to the place where he had been bound, and he prayed on her behalf concerning the conception, and was entreated, as Genesis 25:21 says, and Isaac entreated the Lord, at least in the KJV. Then finally, before I hand it off to Noel, I'll give this. Meredith, I was joking because they said Noel's fun at parties, so I thought it would be funny to have Noel just interviewing people and just dropping some bombs. There's no interview. Okay, so this is the last one. So, how many Old Testament women can you recall who were barren but later, by the will of Yah, gave birth to men who had an important impact on salvation history? So name the women and their sons. So Sarah, we've talked about her. She was barren prior to the birth of Isaac. Rebecca, again, right here, was barren prior to the birth of Jacob or Israel. We'll get to her eventually. Rachel was barren prior to the birth of Joseph. Manoah's wife was barren prior to the birth of the judge Samson. And Hannah was barren prior to the birth of the prophet Samuel. So in each case, the barrenness, and of course we can go into in each case, the barrenness of the mother was reversed by Yah's intervention. It is by his divine will that sons were born from these women, sons who played an important role in the history of salvation. So Isaac continued the promised seed, made a covenant with Abraham, continued through Isaac. The covenant continued through Jacob. He renamed him Israel, father of the 12 tribes. I would say that's pretty big. Joseph, son of Jacob, became the instrument by which Yah sent the children of Israel into Egypt. Samson, a Nazarite judge, brought judgment on the pagan gods of the Philistines. And the prophet Samuel was the last representative in the era of judges of Israel, and the holy prophet who anointed David as a chosen king. So it just shows how Yah works. Like all these ladies were barren, and look what they produced, a miracle baby. So still have plenty left. I'll hand it off to Noel.
So, all right, there's the interesting thing about the mountain of worship, and I'll be, I guess, talking about this segment, is that in the Aramaic Targum, it's one of the few places where the Masoretic tradition meets the LXX tradition. Because when you get into the LXX material, like First and Second Adam and Eve, a lot of the Adamic literature that is, from the a different kind of timeline, they love talking about the mountain worship. And of course they do here in the Aramaic Targum. And generally when you talked about the mountain worship, you were talking about Mount Moriah, Mount Zion, the place where the temple was, the place where Yahushua is crucified, the place where Jerusalem stands. However, as I put it out in recent weeks, as I've really been seeking this issue out, I believe that Mount Moriah, not Mount Moriah, that the mountain of worship is a reference to the mountain range that goes from kind of just north of Jerusalem all the way down to Hebron. It's probably a good, 20-mile chunk of mountain, and that's where the sons of Seth were living through that whole region there. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I want to jump back and look at where it talks about, verse 8. And I thought this was kind of a little neat description here, where it says, "And Abraham expired and died in a good old age, aged and satisfied with all good, and Ishmael wrought repentance in his days, and afterwards was gathered to his people." Now, talking about, on a side note here, talking about Abraham's bosom, who is Ishmael's people exactly? I would assume that would be Abraham and his people, if the explanation here is wrought repentance. And Ishmael was not, say, a righteous individual in his life. It was a clear contrast between him and Yitzhak, and we're going to see that contrast as well between Esau and Yaakov. Yitzhak went and studied with Shem, at the mountain of worship. Ishmael never did. He was never interested in that. But we see later in life he wrought repentance. And what that reminds me of is the thief on the cross. That, here we don't know much about this thief on the cross. We know that he committed an act of thievery that ended up getting him killed. I mean, that's it. I don't know. Did he like kill from a pilot's? I mean, like steal the purse from Pilate's wife? I mean, how bad was this, right? But anyways, he repented, obviously, and Yahushua said that he would be with him in paradise. Well, here's a passage from Visions of Paul, and again, Visions of Paul is not a perfect text. There are, like any of these. I did talk about this at length when we went over Paul in the Hidden Wilderness. Was it last week? I think it was, or 2 weeks ago. And so here's an interesting passage because, again, where earlier tonight I was talking about how there's the 7 days of when somebody dies, the wicked and the righteous, that they get to wander the cosmos, get their their questions answered before they're put down in Sheol. Well, this is another one of those passages that talks about the same thing, the 7 days. And this scene that is brought forth is when a wicked, unrighteous soul in those 7 days is brought before the throne of the Most High, and this is what it says. And again, I saw and behold the soul which was led forward by 2 angels, weeping and saying, "Have pity on me, just Elohim, Elohim the judge. For today is 7 days since I went out of my body, and I was handed over to these 2 angels, and they led me through to those places which I had never seen. And Elohim the just judge saith to him, What hast thou done? For thou never didst mercy, wherefore thou were handed over to such angels as have no mercy." And by the way, that's huge for Yahusha, like huge, showing compassion and mercy to people. "And because thou did not do uprightly, so neither did they act piously with thee in the hour of thy need." These are the tormenting angels that I was telling you about, the locust creatures with the hair of the women and stuff. They are tormenting this guy because he did not. They are not showing him mercy because he did not show anybody else mercy. "Confess therefore thy sins which you did commit when placed in the world." And he answered, the dead soul said, "Adonai, I did not sin." That's the wrong answer to give. "And Yahuwah the just Adonai was angered in fury when it said, I did not sin, because it lied. And Elohim said, Do thou think thou art still in the world? If any one of you sitting there conceal and hide his sin from his neighbor, here indeed nothing whatsoever shall be hid. For when the Ruach come to adore in sight of the throne, both the good works and the sins of each one are made manifest. And hearing these things, the soul was silent, having no answer. And I heard the Yahuwah Elohim, the just judge, again saying, Come, angel of the soul, and stand in the midst. And the angel of the sinful soul came. This angel of the sinful soul is talking about his guardian angel, who did not have a very pleasant time guarding this guy. It said, let's see, and the angel of the sinful soul came, having in his hand a manuscript, and said, These, Adonai, in my hands are all the sins of this soul from his youth till today, from the 10th year of his birth. And if thou command, Adonai, I will also relate his acts from the beginning of his 15th year. Okay, so the angel, what he's doing, he's like, look, I'll start reading off every sin this guy's committed from the age of 10 upwards, or 15 if you prefer. Which that's kind of interesting. That kind of gives us an understanding that, children are not held accountable. And there's an age of accountability. Let's see, where was I? Oh, and Yahuwah Elohim, the just judge, said, I say unto the angel, I do not expect of thee an account of him since he began to be 15 years old, but stayed his sins for 5 years before he died and before he came hither. And again, Elohim, the just judge, said, For by myself I swear, and by my holy angels, and by my virtue, that if he had repented 5 years before he died, on account of 1 year's life, oblivion would now be thrown over all the evils which he sinned before, and he would have indulgence and remission of sins. And now indeed he shall perish, And the angel of the sinful soul answered and said, Adonai, command that angel to exhibit those Ruachoth. And these tormenting angels come and haul them off. And I don't know about a lot of you guys, but first of all, I do hope I end this race well. I hope that I continue to conform more and more to the Master as to Yahuwah, or Yahuwah and his son Yahushua HaMashiach, as I produce more fruits and through the Holy Spirit and so on and so forth. I hope that I do not have to. I think a lot of us hope that we do not have to give accountability of the sins of our youth. Because a lot of us did a lot of stupid things when we were young. Some of us here are still young and probably doing stupid things, and some of us are older and probably still, unfortunately, doing some stupid things. But I was like, yeah, if you if you can scratch out the first 40 years of my life and read from this would be nice. But all that to say that it seems to me that even in these texts, Yahuwah is like, look, I'm willing to forgive and forget all those sins you did. Okay, I won't even bring them to mind. If you can just show me that you repented later in life, you can come in, right? And some people aren't capable of that. So that kind of reminded me there of Ishmael. Now, going back to the mountain of worship, and it says in verse 21, and Yitzhak went to the mountain of worship, the place where his father had bound him, and Yitzhak in his prayer turned the attention of the Holy One, blessed be he. And the point of why he's going is that Rivka is without child. All right. And it said that in verse 22, and she went into the school of Shem Rabbah to supplicate mercy before Yahuwah. Now, most of us, when we would read something like that, we're not even really thinking what that may entail. We're just thinking like she's going to a literal school in the earth. But hopefully you guys know my theory on this is that Shem was he was a Melchizedek, meaning he was like Enoch at this point. Okay, that he was living up in paradise. So when it says that Rivka right here, and I'll show you why I conclude this. Just a few passages to kind of whet your appetite. When it says she went to the school of Shem Rabbah, if I'm reading this right, it means she went to paradise to inquire, or to some sort of like access point, somewhere where you could at least knock on a door and be like, "Hey, can I talk to a Shem over there?" So here's something similar going on. Now, I'm going to be reading from the Tales of the Patriarchs. If you need a refresher on the Tales of Patriarchs, this was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And amazingly, even though the writings of Abraham came out in the 1800s and people say it was, a forgery, it was invented, amazingly, the writings of Abraham matches things that can only be found in the Dead Sea Scrolls like Tales of the Patriarchs. So clearly the writings of Abraham is very old. And this is what we read here. This is the let's see, who is this? Oh, this is Lamech who is talking. Who is Lamech? Lamech is Noah's father. Who was Lamech's father? It was Methuselah, and Methuselah's father was Enoch. Now remember, Lamech was never really considered a righteous person. I don't think Methuselah was to his dying day, but Lamech kind of became worldly. So here's the scene, and it says, I thought in my heart that so the scene is Noah's born, and Noah's like glowing. I mean, he's angelic, and I actually think that he was an angel. That he was a pre-existent angel that was interceded into the human race at a very dark time of need, and so he's freaking out. We see the same account in Enoch and other places. The whole house is glowing. There's like fire coming out of his eyes. Just he's talking like a baby, and everyone's like, there's something really wrong with this child. This is not natural. And this is what he says: I thought in my heart that the conception was the work of the watchers. Right? This is Lamech saying this. He's saying that he's accusing his wife on the bed that she gave birth to the child. He's like, you slept with the watchers. Like, that's the last thing a woman wants to hear when she gives, she goes through delivery and the husband's like, you cheated on me. That's not my son. That's what he's saying. The pregnancy of the holy ones, and that it belonged to the giants. and my heart was upset by this. Yeah, you think? He sounds upset. I, Lamech, turned to my wife, Baitnosh is her name, and said, swear to me by the Most High, great Adonai, King of the universe, the sons of heaven, that you will truthfully tell me everything if, you will tell me without lies, But then Baitnosh, she responds and says, my wife spoke harshly to me. Yeah, you think? And she cried and said, oh, my brother and Adonai, remember my pleasure, the time of love, gasping for breath. That's it's pretty intimate right there. I will tell you everything truthfully, and then my heart began to ache. When Baitnosh realized my mood had changed, then she withheld her anger and said to me, oh, my Adonai brother, remember my pleasure. I swear to you by the great Holy One, the King of the heavens, that this seed, pregnancy, and planting of fruit comes from you and not a stranger, watcher, or son of the heaven. Why is your expression changed and your spirit saddened? I speak honestly to you. Then I, Lamech, went to my father, Methuselah, and told him everything so that he would know the truth, because he is well liked, and he is in well with the holy ones, and they share everything with him. So Methuselah is in a relationship where the angels, the holy ones, as well as the sons of Elohim, come and they congregate with him. So get this. Methuselah went to Enoch to find the truth. Now, Enoch has already ascended by this time. He's gone. But he is able to travel to Enoch, and he went to Parvaim, or Parvaim, where Enoch lived. Okay, and they address the situation, and Enoch says, no, he's cool. He's one of us. You know, your son, Noah. He's not, you're good. Go back to your wife. It's all on the plan. All right? So note on the location of Parvaim, Parvaim, okay? This is what we read in 2 Chronicles 3:6 concerning Solomon and his temple. And he garnished the house, the temple, with precious stones for beauty, and gold was gold of Parvaim. So they got the gold for the temple from paradise. All right. Now there's a point to all of this, is that Methuselah was able, Lamech wasn't able to because he wasn't righteous. Methuselah was, and he was able to go and ask of Enoch about his son. Now we see a similar situation going on with Rivkah. Okay, she is able somehow to go get a message to Shem. So let me go through some of these passages. And I didn't talk about this a lot last week, but the last couple, would have been 2 weeks ago, after the sacrifice of Yitzhak, we did talk about how he went to the school of Shem for like 3 years, and then Abraham called him back so that he could get a wife, if you recall. Well, this is what it says in Legends of the Jews. After the sacrifice on Mount Moriah, Abraham returned to Beersheba, the scene of so many of his joys. Yitzhak was carried to paradise by angels, and there he sojourned for 3 years. Okay, well that's interesting. So this is what Genesis 22:19 says in the Targum. And the angels on high took Yitzhak and brought him into the school of Shem the Great, and he was there 3 years. Now it doesn't say he took him to paradise, took him to the school of Shem the Great. Well, it seems to be implied that by this time the school of Shem was in paradise. This is what we read in Jasher 23:85. This is, of course, right after the same scene, after the sacrifice that didn't happen. And she, Sarah, came with her maidservants and men servants to Kiryat Arba, which is Chevron. And she asked concerning her son, and she remained there while she sent some of her servants to seek where Abraham had gone with Yitzhak. They went to seek him in the house of Shem and Eber, and they could not find him. Well, who were they not able to find? Now, obviously, they were not able to find Abraham and Yitzhak, but it never says that they were able to find Shem by this point either. Now, it seems that if the house of Shem was still there on the earth at this time, that he was gone, or that it was taken up immediately afterwards. I think he was gone by this point. Uh, okay, let's see. What is this? This is the next chapter in Jasher. Let's see what this says. And Eliezer did as Abraham ordered him, and Eliezer sworn to Abraham his Adonai upon this matter. And Eliezer rose up and took 10 camels and of the camels of his Adonai, and 10 men from his Adonai's servants with him. And they rose up and went to Haran, the city of Abraham and Nahor, in order to fetch a woman, that would be Rivkah, that they bring home for Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. And while they were gone, Abraham sent to the house of Shem and Eber, and they brought from thence his son Yitzchak. But we know at this point that he was already the school of Shem was in paradise. So how do you get a message to paradise? I don't know. I think it's been lost to us at this point in time. All right. So, and then one more passage from Jasher. This comes from let's see. And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before. Okay, well, this is he's speaking to Sarah, and he says, I will go and bring him to Shem and Eber his son, and there he will learn the ways of Yahuwah. Anyways, I don't need to go through that. But anyways, we see that. I think I made my points. I think that's what's happening. I think it's something very similar to the situation with Noah. And when Methuselah went to Enoch, it was over a baby being born. We see the same thing happening with Yitzchak and Rivkah. So back to you, Michael.
All right, interesting chat going on there. Okay, so this will be my longest dialogue here. This is my most. Okay, so 23, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna post that again. I thought that was good. Okay, so this shows the difference between the KJV and the Palestinian. Pretty similar up until if the children of the younger will keep the commandments of the law. So that's the difference, that Jacob will keep the commandments of the law. Now, this kind of came out of left field when I saw this, but it might help Noah with his, I don't know, his kind of studies. But I found some rabbis that read Edom to stand for Rome. Commentary, interpret the words, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, in Genesis 25:23, to teach that at any one time, one of Israel and Rome will be ascendant, and the other will be subjugated. Again, I don't know what to make of that, but that was commentary. This one on 23 and then 24 is my longest, but also my favorite part of the whole thing. 2, I have loved you, says Yahweh, yet you say, and what have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Says Yahweh, yet Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Romans 9:11. For the children not yet being born, nor having done any good or evil, that the purpose of Yah according to election might stand, not of works, but of him who calls. It was said to her, the older shall serve the younger. As it is written, Yaakov I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Scripture tells us that character traits and purpose can be set even before birth. We know this. You know, a lot of denominations use these ones. Psalms 58:3, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. They are estranged from the womb. And of course, Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you as a prophet to the nations. Okay, so 24 is my longest, but also my favorite. So I guess I can do the same thing for that. This is KJV and Palestinian. So, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And I'm going to do a word study on inner womb. Palestinian says, and the 270 days or 9 months of her being with child were completed to bring forth, and behold, twins were in the womb. So, word study in her womb links with Genesis 38. And I guess I'll post this so you guys can read along. Because I'm going to be going deep onto this one, because this blew me away. So, now it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she is also with child by harlotry. Then Judah said, bring her out, and let her be burned. It was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law, saying, I am with child by the man to whom these things belong. And she said, please examine and see whose signet ring and cords and staff are these. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not have relations with her again. It came about that time that she was given birth that behold, there were twins in her womb. So in her womb and in her womb, same. So a summary on Judah and Tamar. guys, if it's been a while since you've researched that. But Judah had three sons: Er, Onan, and Shelah. Er married a woman named Tamar, this lady, and was so evil that he died. Onan married Tamar, but didn't want to preserve his brother's place in the lineage, and so he did not impregnate Tamar, and was killed for that sin. Judah had seen both of his sons die after marrying Tamar, so he hid Shelah away and kept him from Tamar. Tamar, the widow who had the right to bear Judah's eldest son's child and continue the family line, responded. She dressed as a prostitute, tempted Judah, conceived a child with him without him knowing who she was. Later, when Judah found out, this is where that previous passage comes in, he threatened to kill her for adultery against Shelah, whom she is technically betrothed to. When she revealed that Judah was, in fact, the father, he then admitted that he had wronged her. Tamar had twin sons, Perez and Zerah, and Perez continued the family line, and his descendants included.
In the bottom of the ocean, places for something to hide.
It's not really.
Doesn't matter what was causing it. What matters is getting home.
Okay, so Perez continued the family line, and his descendants included King David and Yeshua. Okay, so Perah and Zerah, have you researched them? They had a similar battle in the womb. About at that time she was giving birth. This is Tamar. Behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth. One put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But it came about as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. Then she said, "What a breach you made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread in his hand. He was named Zerah. So there was another battle in the womb. Same with Jacob and Esau. Okay, so the similarities between Jacob and Esau. On something here. So both cases, the wife conceives twins. Both cases. Oh wait, it's not similarities between Jacob and Esau, but you get the rift there. In both cases, there was a struggle for who comes out first. In Jacob's case, Esau comes out first with Jacob class deal. In Zerah and Perez case, Zerah puts his hand out first, but then goes back in and Perez comes out. In both cases, the one identified as being born first is marked with red or red hair. In Esau's case, he is born covered in red hair. In Zerah's case, the midwife puts a scarlet thread around his wrist when he comes out. I've also noted the scarlet thread is used symbolically in a number of purification rituals of the Bible. The two goats of Yom Kippur, the scapegoat that is cast into the wilderness, is marked with a red thread around his horns. It's also used in other purification atonement rituals. Okay, so when the time came for her to, okay, I already read that, right? So scarlet thread. Okay, so after all this, if you guys follow Dr. Pigeon, it's an older study, but he believes that Perez became the Pharisees, which is interesting. So they tried to steal the birthright of Zerah. Have you guys done research of that? I don't think he's elaborated more than a video or two a while ago, but he believes Perez became the Pharisees that Yeshua knew. Okay, so we're on Perez. Perez means to break. It can mean breaking out of an enclosure, like a womb, or breaking into pieces. Perez is an ancestor of Yeshua. His descendants are recognized in Judah following the captivity of Babylon. According to 1 Chronicles, descendants came back with Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was one of the leaders during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah and is a notable descendant. Zerah is the second twin. His name comes from a verb meaning to rise or shine. Yet in this case, the meaning is generally thought to derive from the scarlet cord wrapped around his wrist. The scarlet color is bright, reminiscent of sunrise. One notable story about Zerah's sons involves Zimri. Joshua 6 describes the fall of Jericho. Afterwards, Joshua cautions against taking any of the goods from the city. Achan takes some of the devoted things. Joshua and the company lose their next battle, and this deception is determined to be the cause. Achan pays for the items he stole with his life. Some more on the scarlet thread. Scarlet thread or scarlet yarn in the tabernacle's curtains and the high priest ephod. In Joshua 2, two spies, which was interesting because this is Yeshua's bloodline as well, scarlet thread. Two spies had been sent to Jericho in advance of the Israelites' taking of the city. The spies were hidden in Jericho by Rahab, the harlot, who expressed her faith in Israel's God and protected the spies. Rahab allowed the Hebrew spies to escape from Jericho by letting them down through her window by means of a rope made of scarlet thread. As they departed, the spies told Rahab this cord of scarlet thread in the window, or tie the cord of scarlet thread in the window, with the promise that she and her household will be kept safe in the coming invasion. By faith, she obeyed, and she did what it said. And this will be my last one on 24. Interesting theory, however, involves Zeres and Darda. Scholars think he founded Dardinia in Turkey. Greek mythology attributes the founding to a son of Zeus, since the name of Zerah, oftentimes written as Zerah, is similar to Zeus. In a discussion of Solomon's wisdom, it states Solomon is wiser than Ethan, the Ezraelite, and Haman, Calcol, Darda, children of Mahol. These names match 4 of Zerah's sons. Mahol means supreme god or dance, lending more credence to Zerah's connection with the Zeus mythology. Scholars have long wondered why Zerah is mentioned alongside Perez in Matthew's genealogy of Yeshua. One explanation might be that after the fall of Troy, scholars think Zerah's descendant migrated to Britain and Ireland. Interesting. By the time of David, Zerahites had become the royal family in Ireland. And around the time of the fall of Jerusalem, one of the Zedekiah's daughters, descendant of Judah through Perez, marries one of Ireland's princes, descendants of Judah through Zerah. So I threw out a lot there, and you might have to listen to it again. But what do you think of the stories between Jacob and Esau and Perez and Zerah? I thought it was very interesting, and it all started based on that word study. And they both had issues in the womb, and then there were issues after they were born. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. All right, so I'll do one more. It is long, and then I'll hand it back to Noel. Number 25. So again, I'll compare. So, came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau, Palestinian. And the first came forth wholly red as a garment of hair, and they called his name Esau, because he was born altogether complete with the hair of the head, and the beard, and the teeth, and the grinders. So if there's red in that sentence, it means I'm going to do a word study. So this led me down another rabbit hole too. So, and the first came out red. So 1 Samuel 16. His sons passed before Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen these. Then Samuel said to Jesse, are these all the boys? And he said, the youngest is still left, but behold, he is tending the sheep. So Samuel said to Jesse, send word and bring him, for we will not take our places at the table until he comes here. So this is David anointed. So he sent word and brought him in, and now he was reddish, same word as Esau. David was reddish, with beautiful eyes and handsome appearance. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brother. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward, and Samuel sent out and went to Ramah. So David and Esau are both red. It kind of made me think, like, does this somehow destroy the Black Hebrew Israelite take if Esau is the same color as David? Now, I did a little bit of research, and they would make the case that that's not talking about a skin tone. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Okay, so now a bit more on that story. The most famous redhead in the Bible is David. So this commentary tends to agree with me. He was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. The word translated ruddy could refer to David's complexion. Okay, here it is. But some commentators believe it refers to his hair. David could have been redheaded. His character was the opposite that of Esau's, though. David was a man after his own heart, while Esau was a profane person. David had strong passions. When those passions were surrendered to the Lord, they served him well. He fought battles, was the leader of men, and penned most of the Psalms. But then when those passions were allowed to control him, they led David to deep sin and deception. Okay, so a few more on this. The red and Adam, I thought it was really interesting. In this passage, there are word plays on the names of the twins. Esau is red and hairy, symbolizing his animal-like nature, while Jacob is related to the Hebrew's word for heel and smooth. In Esau's case, the wordplay is between the Hebrew words for red or Adam, which sounds like Edom, the land of Esau's descendants in hairy, Seir. Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, behold, and this is Genesis 27, 11, behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. And his name is Esau. The Hebrew word for hairy also sounds like the region of Edom that Esau and his descendants will inhabit, the red clay of Seir, as Numbers 24:18 says. Okay. More on Jacob and Esau. This is the big thing in the chapter, so hope you guys don't mind. I'm going along here. According to the narrative, Jacob or Yaakov's name means heel catcher or usurper. That's quite a difference there. So Genesis 27:36. Then he said, is he not rightly named Jacob, for he has supplanted me these 2 times? This is Esau talking. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? And Hosea 12:3-4. In the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his maturity he contended with God. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He found him at Bethel, and there he spoke with us. Given the etymology as meaning one who has supplanted or betrayed his brother. So, continuing, Jacob is described as quiet, but the Hebrew word smooth is better translated as civilized or refined. The Hebrew word tam is from the root meaning to be complete, finished, perfect, but the word can also mean smooth, as in the smoothness of his skin. The same Hebrew adjective is used elsewhere in the scripture to describe someone who's deceptive in their speech. That's interesting. Proverbs 5:3, he will die for lack of instruction, and the greatness of his folly he will go astray. And Proverbs 26:28, a lying tongue hates those it crushes, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Jacob becomes a man who is both smooth of skin, refined in his taste, and deceptive, both smooth and slippery in his speech. And we'll read later, when he goes and gets his wife, maybe he had some payback there. Okay, a few more commentaries. Bill Cloud is an OG in the Torah community. He has plenty of old studies that might benefit you guys if you guys look into him. So this was from his magazine. So when the twins are born, the first one comes out red and hairy. So he looks as if he is wearing a garment, a somewhat frightening thought if you consider this was Isaac's firstborn. Due to his appearance, they decided to call him Esau, or hairy. And needs to be pointed out that here that the name Esau is written in Hebrew is related to the word for grass, and specifically unfruitful grass, the weed, the tare. Following Esau is his younger brother who had his hand latched onto Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. So unfruitful grass, weed, or tare. The Hebrew name that has been rendered as the English Jacob is Yaakov. Throughout history, both Jewish and Christian commentators have translated this name as meaning supplanter or deceiver. If we presume this definition to be accurate, then the struggle that had been confined to the womb continued to the very point of birth, with Jacob still determined to supplant his brother's birthright. The evidence for this is the fact that his hand laid hold of his brother's heel. While it is true that the root word akav, that forms the basis of the name Yaakov, means to supplant, it is also true that this same root means heel. Furthermore, when the letter Yud, which is said to represent and is attached to the word ahil, it forms the name Yaakov or Jacob. Considering the context, it seems obvious to me that Jacob, instead of meaning supplanter, means hand on heel. I don't know. So still the question remains why his hand was on his brother's heel. If you consider that the Lord had chosen Jacob and not Esau, as I read the Malachi verse earlier, in time, Jacob would become a threat to his perceived primacy. So then I submit to the reader that Jacob's hand is on his brother's heel to prevent the heel of his soon-to-be adversary from crushing his head. That's an interesting thought. So they're saying Esau was trying to kill him. So if Esau's heel comes down to the top of Jacob's head, remember, they had been struggling, then it becomes likely Jacob would be killed. Jacob is killed and there's no Israel. Now, who would want to get rid of Israel? So years later, when Jacob has obtained both the birthright and blessing from Isaac, it is Esau who makes the claim that Yaakov means supplanter. So it should be noted that Esau was profane and despise the birthright. Thus, any accusation he rails against Jacob should be considered suspect. I thought that was really good study. Not sure if you guys believe that, but I thought that was really good. I still have a decent amount, but I've been speaking for a while. I'll hand it back to Noel, then I'll finish off.
Yeah, that was a really good explanation, and it seems to me that I've said this before. The English language is one of the only ones where we name our children after words from other languages. Nobody would name their child, dances with wolves, or what was his wife's name? There stands with the fist. But in other language, again, you wouldn't generally call your child, running through the woods, or a rain cloud morning, or I don't know, but whatever. All these names, they actually mean that in these other languages, right? So it seems to me that if the first one is Harry, and they're naming him that, and they literally see that his hand is coming out, holding his foot, his ankle, that they just makes sense that they would call him that. So there was a few things you mentioned that I wanted to cover. Is I'm totally there. David was redheaded. I wish there were depictions. If they're going to make movies and such of David, cartoons, whatever, why don't they ever make this guy redheaded? It seems so obvious he was. They always make him not. And the other thing too, what you had covered about the Zerah, who is mentioned alongside Perez and Matthew's genealogy of Yahusha, and how they think that the Zerahs went on to Britain and Ireland and formed a kingdom. If you guys recall, I talked about that very thing in the Cities of the Millennial Kingdom when I talked about Great Britain and the Stone of Scone, and the whole idea is that Jeremiah, or Yirmiyahu, he had two missions in mind. He was given from Yahuwah. One was to uproot the kingdom, and the other was to plant. He uprooted Israel, or Yasharel, and he planted them elsewhere. The question is, where did he plant them? But the problem is with that is that you always need Judah, Yehuda, to rule over the children of Yasharel. And so, interestingly enough, after Babylonian captivity, the children of Judah, they never again rule as kings. They were done with the kingship there. They were looking to get a king, right, in their Messiah. Interestingly enough, they rejected their Messiah, their king, and it is my point of view, my conclusion, that Israel did embrace him in England, where they were planted, and that he ruled over them as kingdom, and that was the epicenter of the Millennial Kingdom. And in fact, a lot of people will argue against what they call like Aryan Israel or whatever. But the thing is when you start getting into the Millennial Kingdom research, it all starts coming together and it fits. And you're like, yeah, I think that was Israel over there. And I think that Yahushua was their king. The other thing I wanted quickly is because Michael brought it up about Esau being Rome, is that we read it in the chapters, an interesting scene where he is wrestling. He beheads Nimrod, and let me see if I could find this here in the ending of. It says in Jasher, when he kills on the day he kills Nimrod and beheads him, it says Jasher 27:2. It says, and Nimrod, king of Babel, the same was Amraphel. Okay, so they're saying that this historical king Amraphel, that's who this Nimrod was. That again goes back to my theory time and time again. I keep pointing out that nobody actually called him Nimrod. He went by a bunch of other names. And again, there was, the ancients believe there was a succession of Nimrods. It wasn't just one. Well, what the death of this Nimrod with Esau, it was the end of the Nimrodic kingdom. And in fact, it says at the end of Jasher, And at the death of Nimrod, his kingdom became divided into many divisions, and all those parts that Nimrod reigned over were restored to the respective kings of the land, who recovered them after the death of Nimrod. And all the people of the house of Nimrod were for a long time enslaved to all the other kings of the land. So that was the end of Nimrod's kingdom. No, Babylon would rise again, but it was never the same. So what happened is in the same accounts, let's see if I can find it in Jasher. Where does it say it? It doesn't matter. I don't have to. Let's see. Okay. And when Esau saw the mighty men of Nimrod coming at a distance, he fled and thereby escaped. And Esau took the valuable garments of Nimrod, which Nimrod's father had bequeathed to Nimrod, and with which Nimrod prevailed over the whole land. And he ran and concealed them in his house. And Esau took those garments and ran into the city on account of Nimrod's men, and he came unto his father's house wearied and exhausted. Okay, so this, as you guys probably know, these garments were earlier described in Jasher, that Ham stole them from Noah. The writings of Abraham says actually the night that he, uncovered his father's nakedness, that's the very occasion when he stole the garments. And those were the garments, of course, were the skin of the serpents. When Yahuwah clothed Adam and Eve in the garden because they were found without clothing, and he took the clothing from the skin. So this was it. So this is symbolic in that Esau is now transferring the power from Nimrod's kingdom to Rome. I'm not going to get into that tonight because if you tune in next Sabbath, I'm going to be going over this whole thing with, I'm doing part 2 on Nimrod, but it's going to be touching on Ham and how Ham and Nimrod were kind of duking out for competition through wizardry, magic, toppling kingdoms. And Esau was ultimately transferring it over to Ham's department and establishing Greece and Rome. So really interesting stuff happening here. All right, jumping back up to let's see, where was I? Okay, so in verse 32, this is he's coming in. He has just killed Nimrod. He's exhausted. He's committed all these other sins on that day, and he's weary. And he asks for the bowl, the bowl of soup and the bread. And Yaakov's like, hey, this is my moment, right? So he's like, all right, fine, sell me your birthright. And that sounds like that escalated really quickly and all that kind of stuff. But look at his response. He said. And Esau said, behold, I'm going to die. Which, by the way, if I'm going to die, that's the time I'm going to cling to my birthright. I'm going to die. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to the world to come. But he says, in another world, I shall have no life. And what then is to me is the birthright, or the portion of the world which thou speakest. Now, I could do a whole thing on here on Edom and how the Edomites, basically have tried to take over the land. In fact, who's in the land today, right? The land of Israel. And so it's interesting that he gave it up on that day, but ever since that day, they've been trying to take it back, right? Well, here's some stuff I dug up on this. One of the things that's interesting about Esau's response here to Yaakov is that it matches Cain's response to Abel. And so what Michael's already talked about here, about how he basically described Esau in a way like he's the adversary. He is here just to try to crush the head of Yasharel, right? So listen to this here. And this, of course, is for the Aramaic Targum, Genesis 4:8. We did this, 20 weeks ago now. And Cain said to Abel, his brother, come and let us two go forth into the field. And it was then when they had gone forth into the field, Cain answered and said to Abel, I perceive that the world was created in goodness. So keep in mind, this is Abel speaking, not Cain. I perceive that the world was created in goodness, but it is not governed according to the fruit of good works. For there is respect of persons and judgments. He's talking about I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. Cain is talking, all right? I was like, that can't be right. Cain said to Abel, okay, I perceive that there is respect of persons and judgments. And of course, Yahuwah, as you guys know, he always says, I am not a respecter of persons. But Cain's like, he is a respecter of persons. Therefore, it is that thy offering was accepted, and mine not accepted with goodwill. Havel answered and said to Cain, in goodness was the world created, and according to the fruit of good works is it governed. And there is no respect of persons in judgment, but because the fruits of my good works were better than thine, which is, you tell your brother that's good for a good whopping. My oblation before thine hath been accepted with goodwill. And then Cain answered and said to Havel, there is neither judgment nor judge, nor another world, nor will good reward be given to the righteous, nor vengeance be taken of the wicked. And it's funny because Cain is like, he recognizes that Yahuwah did give Havel the reward, but then he's like, yeah, he becomes like an agnostic or an atheist. He's like, yeah, there's no judge, no world to come. I mean, he basically did the same thing. Like he murdered his brother because he was like, there's gonna be no consequence to this. And so here's something that comes from the book of the Nazarene, chapter 18, verse 41. Actually, well, no, I already did that tonight. I'm not going to do that again. All right, that was the passage where Yahushua's talking about the Ruach of darkness. All right, so Michael mentioned how Esau was kind of like an animal in appearance. I found that really interesting because and he acted like a unclean animal. So I want to go through a few things on this here about how, acting like a clean animal or an unclean animal, which is the difference here between Esau and Yaakov. Balaam's ass in the Targum in Numbers, of course, we're a long ways off from this, so good thing is everyone will forget this by the time we get there. Balaam's ass talks about how he has no portion in the world to come. So, and the ass said to Balaam, woe to thee, Balaam, thou wanting in mind when me, an unclean beast, who am to die in this world and not to enter the world to come, thou art not able to curse. How much less canst thou harm the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, on account of whom the world hath been created, but whom thou was going to curse? So that's kind of an interesting idea that we see that in the world to come, at least in terms of eternity, the unclean animals don't have a part in that. It seems like the donkey is saying all the clean animals, they're the ones that are sacrificed, they're going to be in the world to come. Like, we don't think about that. The idea that these sheep and goat and stuff, when they are sacrificed, it is a holy sacrifice that they're giving themselves up, and they're going to have a place in the world to come. And, you can sacrifice unclean animals, they're not going to have a place in the world to come. Of course, that's an abomination, and so on and so forth. And then we see this in Revelation 18:2. You guys all know this. With a mighty voice he shouted, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirits. And by the way, this is talking about Jerusalem. A haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. So you see, unclean birds are there. And then we see in Revelation 22:15, for without New Jerusalem are dogs, are sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whoever loveth and maketh a lie. Now it's interesting that it mentions dogs, they're unclean, but then you see all these characteristic traits like sorcerers, whoremongers. Of course, the sorcerers of the pharmakia in this case are the distributors of big pharmaceutical drugs, amongst other things. But murderers, idolaters are all identified with unclean animals. Okay, are you guys following here, right? So, clean animals, they go into the kingdom. Unclean animals, they don't. Now, here's an interesting quote from The Magician's Nephew, The Chronicles of Narnia. And this is when Aslan creates the world. and he's speaking to all the talking beast, and he says, "Creatures, I give you yourselves," said the strong, happy voice of Aslan. "I give you forever this land of Narnia. I give you the woods, the fruits, the rivers. I give you the stars, and I give you myself. The dumb beasts whom I have not chosen are yours also. Treat them gently and cherish them, but do not go back to their ways, lest you cease to be talking beasts. For out of them you were taken, and into them you can return. Do not so." And interesting, in the last book in the series, the last battle, there's this doorway that is opened up that goes into heaven, and all the creatures in Narnia are like running towards it, and then only some of them go through, and then others they part. I can't remember if it's to the left or to the right, but they become dumb beasts, right? Um, so one more thing here. A couple more things. So this comes from the Epistle of Barnabas, and it's again talking about Barnabas is saying here that Moshe passed in the Torah. There were these laws revealed that you're not to eat unclean animals, and Barnabas is criticizing not the Torah. He's criticizing the readers of the Torah. He's like, all these people, they thought that it was like pigs and shrimp and these kind of things they weren't supposed to eat, which they're not. But what they didn't understand is the spiritual aspect of this, that they were not to act like these beasts. So listen to this here. When Moshe said, "You will not eat the swine, the eagle, the hawk, the crow, or any fish that has no scales," he had three principles in mind. For at the end, he enumerates them in Devarim. I will place, that's Deuteronomy. "I will place before this people my Torah." So this is not Elohim's commandment about crunching. Rather, crunching, I think by crunching he means eating. Rather, Moshe spoke in the Ruach about swine. "You will not cleave to piggish people of this sort. When they get full, they forget their master. And when they are in need, they think of the master. Like the swine who does not know its master when it eats. When hungry, it cries out, and once it has received, is quiet again. Nor will you eat like the buzzard, the hawk, the kite, or the crow." He means that you will not cleave to, nor be like people of that sort, who do not know how to provide for themselves by labor and sweat, but in their iniquity they seize the property of others. They observe, watching whom they will plunder in their covetousness, while they carry on as though innocents. The same way these birds provide no food for themselves by work, but sitting idly by, seek out how they can eat the meat of others. Some people are likewise destructive on account of their evil works. And you will not eat the lamprey, the octopus, or the squid. And he means you will not cleave to or become like people of this sort, who are immoral to the end, having already been condemned to death, even as these accursed fish swim alone in the abyss, not suspended as the others. He goes on and on and on. You guys get the point here. One more interesting passage from the book of the Nazarene. Yahusha says, in the same way of keeping company with unclean people, "Regard each other as brothers, cherishing in sickness and supporting in trouble. Never praise yourself, and if you have virtues, let others discover them. Be careful with whom you associate." I love this line here. "For if a man enters a tannery, though he carry nothing away, a bad smell will accompany him." All right, so I think I'll be passing it over to Michael, and I think that's all I have for tonight for my notes. So go ahead and finish it up.
All right, yeah, I will finish it up. Let's go. So, some more on the names of Jacob, at least. A commentary that said the name derived from. Let's see. Let me put it in here. That means "may God protect." So that's just another dog in the race. But I did find that the name Jacob means "he grasps the heel," which we know, but that is a Hebrew idiom for deceptive behavior. So if you ever search Hebrew idioms, allegedly "he grasped the heel" is a deceptive behavior. This was an interesting take. So a commentary stated that Esau and Jacob were twins and explained the close connection between Edom and Israel, the actual people as a whole, their similar dialects and cultural and kinship ties, while the competition between Esau and Jacob explained the often on enmity between Edom and Israel. So they said biblical scholars saw an analog in Israel history. Esau's descendants, the Edomites, had been a sovereign nation, while the future Israel was still in formation, making Edom the older brother of Israel. Then, in the 10th century, David unified Israel and conquered Edom. That's why the oracle in this verse, or Genesis 20, I should have put it in 23, gave Rebekah during her praise and said, the older will end up serving the younger. That's their take on it. I thought that was interesting. A little bit different take on that. So they also noted that Genesis often repeats the motive of the younger son. So this is just another example of the younger son, some others. So God favored Abel over Cain in Genesis 4. Isaac superseded Ishmael in Genesis 16 through 21. Here, Jacob superseded Esau. Judah, we talked about him earlier, fourth among Jacob's sons, last of the original set born to Leah. Joseph, 11th in line, superseded their older brothers in Genesis 37 through 50. Perez superseded Zerah, and Ephraim superseded Manasseh. So these are just repetitiveness of the younger superseding the older. Okay, so first one is supposed to be KJV. I don't know why I put Palestinian there. So, and Yitzhak loved Esau for the words of the deceit were in his mouth, but Rivkah loved Jacob. And then, okay, hold on. I don't know what I did there. And the lads grew, and Esau was a man of idleness, to catch birds and beasts, a man going forth into the field to kill lives, as Nimrod had killed, and Hanok his son. But Jacob was a man peaceful in his works, a minister of the instruction of Eber, seeking instructions before the Lord. So, 27, the one after that says Jacob was a plain man dwelling in his tent. So, commentary said that when Jacob dwelt in two tents, when it says he's dwelling in tents, it was actually two tents. They were teaching that he dwelt in two tents, the academy of Shem and the academy of Eber. And reading the words, and Rebekah loved Jacob, in Genesis 25:28, that they taught that the more, and this is way out there, but the more Rebekah heard his voice, engaged in study, so she heard his voice in study in the tents, the stronger her love grew for him. So that's a straight commentary, but it's an interesting perspective if true. So, I did some things on the younger son, and then the countries. Here is about shepherd or hunters. Represents the negative image of a predator. The shepherd is the ideal image of a leader. And then these are the verses. I see Yeshua, the good shepherd, and so on. Okay, so let's see. Where did I go? I am so sorry. I don't know. Okay, here it is. Number 29. So Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. So this was another interesting word study that got me put a question out there after I explained it. But 2 Kings 4, talking about Elisha here. So Elisha returned to Gilgal. There was a famine in the land. Remember that too for later. As the sons of the prophets were sitting in front of him, he said to his servant, "Put on the large pot and boil stew." The word stew is the same word as pottage. Instead of reading all that, I'm going to just give you a summary and context of what this story is about. Elisha came to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. The sons of the prophets were sitting before Elisha. Elisha told the servant to set out the great pot and seethe the pottage or the soup or stew for the sons of the prophets. One of the servants went out into the field to gather herbs, found a wild vine, and gathered thereof wild gourds his lap full, and came and shred them into the pot of pottage. They did not know what the wild vine was. The servants poured out the stew for the men to eat, and it came to pass as they were eating the pottage, they cried out, "O you man of God, there is death in the pot," and they could not eat thereof. Elisha told them to bring flour, and Elisha cast it into the pot, and he said to the servant to pour out for the people that they may eat, and then there was no harm in the pot. So if you read that, it's like he was poisoned. So my question is, did Jacob try to poison Esau? So is there something to the pottage that Jacob gave Esau? It's very interesting. Did he poison him? It's all based on that word pottage and stew. I don't know if there is similarities. It's very interesting. But I mean, I'd have to ask Noah if he found anything on that in extra biblical. The Palestinian, a little bit different, but I'll dictate it for you guys. The lentils, comfort its father, came from the wilderness. Oh yeah, Noel did talk about this. The 5 transgressions: strange worship, shed innocent blood, into a damsel, denied the life of the world to come. We talked about that with Cain. I believe that he turned into an atheist and denied all that. Okay, so number 30. Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me, and I pray thee, with the same red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore, his name was called Edom. So this is my Jubilee passage for the night. It's 53. Just kind of goes over the story, the death of Abraham. Let's see. I want to point out, besides the first famine, so in that Elijah passage, there was a famine there. And Jubilees is saying there was a famine during the same time. That's why I'm open to the fact that he might have tried to poison him. I don't know. But it was interesting reading this Jubilees passage. That Jacob sowed lentil pottage. Esau came from the field, was hungry. Give me this pottage. Tell me the birthright, and I will give thee bread. Yeah. So you can read that Jubilees passage. Again, there was a famine in the land during that time. Is this one of the reasons a deal was made? Similar to, this was another thing Stephanie kind of pointed out, that there was a famine in the land during this time. And it's very similar to somewhat of Joseph. When he had all the things, it was giving out bread. So you can see somewhat of a similarity between Jacob and Joseph. I have 2 left. Number 33. Jacob said, "Swear to me this day," and he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright. That word birthright is used one other time. It's Reuben. So 1 Chronicles 5:1. Now the sons of Reuben, firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel. I was trying to find some similarities between Esau and Reuben, but pretty much just came up with losing their birthright. But for those who aren't familiar with Reuben, I'll give you a little summary. Reuben is briefly described as having a sexual activity with Bilhah, his stepmother's maid and father's concubine. On his deathbed, Jacob declares that Reuben will no longer excel. "You went up unto your father's bed, unto my couch, and defiled it." Reuben's behavior angered Jacob to the extent that he gave Reuben's birthright to Joseph. Again, the word study, birthright. It appears Reuben did something way worse. Okay, finally, number 34. So Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So we've been talking about birthrights. What is a birthright? Kind of explained that. I thought it did a great job. The word for birthright was bakora, and in the Hebrew culture, it belonged to the oldest son in each family. His birthright was the most valuable thing a person could have, even more than wealth or worldly treasure, because its holder was entitled to 3 exclusive privileges. First of all, he was the leader of the family, and as such, he had the right to determine the direction of the family. Secondly, he was the judicial authority. That meant if there was an argument between neighbors or family members, he made the judgment call. And finally, the holder of the Bakura also received a double portion of the inheritance. And that meant a lot if you were part of a well-to-do family. That's why, I thought that was awesome. It gives additional context on what exactly this birthright was and what was at stake. And let's see, this is my last thing. So this is the Talmud, so take it for what it's worth. According to the Talmud, the sale of the birthright took place immediately after Abraham died. Talmudic dating would give both Esau and Jacob an age of 15 at the time. Lentils Jacob was cooking was meant for his father Isaac, because lentils are the traditional mourner's meal for Jews. On that day before returning, in a rage over the death of Abraham, Esau committed 5 sins. So that's word Palestinian, similar. He raped betrothed young woman committed murder, which was Nimrod. He denied God, he denied the resurrection of the dead, and he spurned his birthright. Again, just gives a little additional context. That's all I got for 25. That was a lot. I'll hand it off to Noel if he has any last words.
No, that was it. So, gonna open it up to you guys and let us know your thoughts if you had any added observations or anything else. Thank you all for sticking around and listening.
There's plenty who are red server muted, so if you guys want to talk, let us know. Tony, Steph, Salty, Rosalind, Rebecca. Oh, okay, Rebecca's ready.
I just had one small observation when you were talking about the younger inheriting, before the older, and how many times it's happened. And that seems to be some sort of theme with Yahuwah because, Yahusha was talking about that, the first would be last and the last would be first. So there's some parallels there. And I'm not sure what to make of that exactly 100%. Maybe you can explain it.
I mean, a great example of that would be the parable of the two sons, and it's the younger son that goes off and lives a life that finally ends up in the pigsty, and he comes back. Father, runs out there, kind of basically almost lifts his skirt to run out there and embrace his younger son. And the older son is really upset at this because, he stuck around with the father and, how dare he give more money now to the younger son. He's like losing his own money because this would be his inheritance. The younger son already cashed out. And what's interesting is that very few people comment on in that story is that the father is putting on a feast for the younger son now, and he's trying to convince the older son to come into the feast. That he's protesting, he won't come in, and the story ends with him not coming in to the feast. So I don't know. I think that there is something to that. There's a very I don't know, that's common all throughout scripture. You're right.
I think a light bulb just went off for me. Um, he he says that he desires mercy rather than sacrifice, and I think that goes along with he desires repentance, rather than some sort of self-righteousness with a sense of entitlement, and that seems to be the theme. I have the birthright, I'm entitled to it. Um, where the younger might squander, but yet comes back truly repentant. And he would, where the older is, running around with a sense of entitlement and feeling, with a bad attitude and feeling like, hey, I'm entitled. Look at all I've done, So I think that's it. That's the core of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you have examples of younger brothers who are not interested as well. But I mean, it's crazy, like how often that does happen. Where it is the same thing with now we're already on to Yitzhak and Esau, but we'll see Esau. He has no interest in going to learn in the school of Shem, no interest in learning the Torah. Yaakov does. It was the same thing with Yitzhak and Ishmael. They had no interest whatsoever either. And I don't think that Abraham was the firstborn son. He had an older brother. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure he did. That was another light bulb that just went off. Nobody talks about that, but um, Abraham was a younger brother who inherited the kingdom. So yeah, happens a lot.
Did I misunderstand you earlier, or did you actually say that there'll be no unclean animals in, like the new heaven and new earth in paradise, the new city Jerusalem?
Yeah, I saw that there was a kind of heated debate over that or discussion over that. I quoted from Book of Numbers, the Targum, where the Balaam's ass. Let me. So it's not me saying that. I'm quoting from these texts. He says here, this is in Numbers, and the ass said to Balaam, "Woe to thee, Balaam, thou wanting in mind, when me, an unclean beast, who am to die in this world and not to enter the world to come." Okay, so according to this text in the Aramaic Targum in Numbers, the donkey says that, yeah, he's going to die, he's not going to enter the world to come. And that's one of the things that with the clean animals, that it is a holy sacrifice, that it appears to me from what I have read from um, um, material in the Targum, rabbinical, so on and so forth. The clean animals will have a place in the world to come, and then of course you go on to read in Revelation and so on and so forth. They're not really giving a great case. I know everyone gets really upset about this. I have dogs, I have cats, I love them so much, and I can't imagine spending eternity without my dog or cat. I'm not seeing a lot of hope for that argument in Scripture. If we're going strictly on what the Bible has to say about it, maybe there will be dogs running around the streets of New Jerusalem, but according to Revelation, they're going to be outside. So
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the definition of clean and unclean is given to us as far as for what we eat. And I don't think when we're in paradise in our spiritual bodies that we're going to be eating anything. So I just don't see those animals, because it wouldn't matter at that point if we're not eating anything. Everything's going to be clean.
So, like, if you go back into Genesis earlier on, uh, there are. Uh, I don't see the definition of what you eat. I see the definition of the animals. Well, I guess you are what you eat. So, like on Noah's Ark, for example, there were, 7 pair of clean animals versus 2 pair of unclean. So you had 14 giraffes go into the ark. You had 14 sheep go onto the ark. You go down the list. But there were 2 dogs that went onto the ark, and you can even go back to the Targum and see that in the creation week he created the clean and unclean animals. And I don't see anywhere in Scripture where there ceased to be clean and unclean animals. There are still to this day clean and unclean animals. Um, a dog is still an unclean animal, but a sheep is still a clean animal. So again, I would have to see in Scripture where, this isn't what I am saying, right? This is just what I am reading. So if somebody can show me anywhere in Scripture where there will no longer be unclean animals, and keep in mind that in Genesis in the garden, they weren't eating animals. I don't think it was ever intended. God never intended animals to be eaten. It wasn't until Noah where he's like, okay, fine, you guys can eat animals now. Up to that point, they were not intended to, but they were still clean and unclean animals. So again, if someone can show me passages in Scripture where it says that there will be no more unclean animals because everything will be clean, I'm all ears. I can only go with what I uncover.
Yeah, I think the reason there were so many clean animals taken onto the ark is, hey, they were meat eaters. They got to have food to eat because they were on the ark for approximately 1 year, and there were 8 people, so they're going to consume quite a bit of meat. I think that's the reason why there were so many more. And not only that, when the flood was over, one of the first thing they did is they gave sacrifices to Yahuwah for, you know, helping them through the flood. And as far as I think if they were in the Garden of Eden and nobody's eating them, I would think everything's clean. And here again, I could be wrong, but it seems like every time there's a distinction between clean and unclean animals, it's all about food, what we're supposed to eat. And also, I think I agree with you that we didn't eat meat at all. That we were given fruit I think everything that was fruit was given for mankind, and the vegetables is what the animals ate.
Cyber asks on here, but were they unclean in the Garden of Eden? That's a good question. I would have to ask what animals were in the garden. Um, Keep in mind that there are two creation accounts. There is the one in Genesis 1, and then there is the second creation account in Genesis 2, which includes the paradise incident. And of course the order is different, and even what they specify as different animals were created. So I'm not of the impression that all the animals that were on the earth were in paradise. Again, if someone could show that there were now, okay, here's something here. It does say that the lion will lay with the lamb. Or I guess the wolf will lay with the lamb if you're non-Mandela affected. Um, but in those cases, I would also go back to what I had originally stated. Is that it seems like within rabbinical literature, there's this idea that there is a holy sacrifice of clean animals, but the animals that are unclean will not enter. Okay, so again, take that for what you will. Research it. I'm just going by what I read. You guys are free to think, come to whatever conclusions you want on that. So
I think, in my opinion, that when Noah came off of the ark, I don't think that they ate the animals on the ark. I think that those clean animals were strictly for having a sacrifice to him afterwards. Because if you read in when they come off the ark, it says that Noah had, when he built the ark, he took every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered a burnt offering to Yahweh as soon as they'd opened up the doors. So I don't think that, because then I was thinking to myself, well, how are they going to build a fire or cook that on the ark? I think that they just took vegetables and fruits and stuff, and that's kind of what they ate. But I don't know. I'm just not of the opinion that they ate the animals on the ark.
yeah, I don't think they did either. Yeah, I think that they were. I'm definitely with you on that. They were for sacrifices afterwards. But also, I think that the tide had turned and the opinion had turned, and it is clear that Yahuwah did say, like, okay, you can eat animals, and so it seemed to be sending the message that we're going to replenish the earth with more of these, clean animals. And that's an interesting point, by the way, that for those of you who will go to the zoo or what have you, and they will now list on all the cages. You go there, like, there's plenty of this animal in the world, but then this one over here, it's like, oh, it's on the endangered list, and it's always the animals that are the unclean animals that are on the endangered list, and it's because they're being eaten, and they're not supposed to. They're being hunted down and eaten. And if people would just listen to what Yahuwah said and only eat these animals, we wouldn't be having this problem. I'm convinced of that. You're not going to find, obviously clean animals on the endangered list. So. Yeah, a lot of you are coming. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Noah was a vegetarian. I can't. Do I eat meat? I do not eat mammals, and I don't even like saying the word mammal because I don't. Scientifically, I understand that I'm a mammal. Biblically, I am not a mammal. I am not a beast of the field. Humans are. I understand that how they classify mammals, but the Bible doesn't classify them that way, right? We are a distinct creature as apart from the apes and the dogs and everything else. But the only animals that I eat at this time is poultry, like fish. No, poultry, like I'll eat chicken or turkey, or fish, and that's it. I don't eat cattle or anything else. And I might even go off poultry and just keep the fish. but I refer to myself as a feastitarian now, and I got that from Rob. He used to, lead this with us, and he refers to himself as a feastitarian. He doesn't even eat chicken or turkey. I think he does eat fish, but he, when Passover comes around, I'll eat a lamb, obviously. Not anymore. He changed. He eats meat now.
He does.
Okay.
Some issues that I have with, with people like biblically and stuff. I mean, Yahweh obviously says that we are allowed to eat meat and stuff, and that, but I think that people are kind of going to where they'll try to shame you for kind of eating meat and for eating like a cow or a lamb or something like that. But we do know that Yahweh said it was okay to go ahead and eat that. But I think sometimes you get into some groups and say, oh, well, like, I mean, I'm for, if you feel convicted, or if that's what you feel you want to do, then have at her. But I would never want to try to make someone feel guilty for not because they do eat meat, or that they that oh, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm this or that. I just think that it's just kind of again, it's just like a division of people, and that as long as you're not eating unclean meat, I think that and you're eating proper meat that's been husbandry properly, and that it's been cared for the way Yahweh has asked us to care for our meats and stuff, that I don't think we should be shaming people. I'm not saying that you're doing that. No, I'm just saying that I've been in circles where I think people do try to shame you for eating meat.
Yeah, there's generally three things that I don't like to talk about on here. One is meat, the other is marijuana, and the other is sex. Because those three things are highly argumentative and used to shame people, and virtue signaling and all sorts of things like that. And it's kind of those things where everyone is on their own journey and kind of has to figure this stuff out. So, well, yeah, I brought up all three, John, but I mean, like, I'm not like telling you whether you should smoke marijuana or not. I'm not telling you whether you should enter a polygynous relationship or not, or what position you're supposed to be having sex in or not, and or whether you should eat cattle or not. You guys get what I'm saying. Like, those are all things that I would love to. I'll be free to talk about all those things, but people get so upset over it. So I'm just like, let everybody figure this out for themselves. They can figure out their own sex life. I don't need to be was it Dr. Ruth or whatever. Yeah, for me with I will say though with cattle, it's it's uh it's just it's something I guess I've always struggled with compassion for cattle. And this is actually one of the things that I will say that I really enjoyed in the books of the Nazarene, where there was this one scene where Yahushua was sleeping in a barn or a stable as an adult. And he went and he handed his jacket, his coat to it was an ox or something. And people were complaining, like, why would you do that? And he would actually really criticize people in there. He's like people who would just kick their dog out at night in the cold. And he would criticize people for not having compassion on animals and the littlest of animals. And so for me, I was since I was very young, I've always wanted to go up to cattle and just love them and hug them and talk to them, and they'll talk back to me, and they'll look at me. I'm like, I can't eat you. So it's just been one of those things where if there's like a piece of meat on a plate, I see that, and like I could see the cattle in the field, and I could feel its breath, and it's the swishing of the tail for the flies, and just all that kind of stuff, and I can't. Oh yeah, the calendar. I guess is number 4, Andrew. I don't talk about that too much. Yeah.
Well, if you've never tried it, and I never did until I came here to the Philippines, goat is an excellent replacement for beef.
Yeah, the only time I had goat was like 3 or 4 Passovers ago, and a guy in South Carolina. He's Torah. He's does goat husbandry for a career, and so he went and he killed the goat on Passover. He invited us over. We grabbed some meat and went home, and yeah, it was a very interesting experience. It tasted very different than any meat I've ever had. It could have been just been the way it was cooked, though.
Yeah, the way it's prepared makes a definite difference. I went to a restaurant here that's specified. I mean, their specialty was goat, and it was horrible. I mean, I couldn't even eat it. I told them, I said, this is terrible, and it was very expensive. But I've got two brother-in-laws here that they cook it, and it's just amazing. I mean, really, really good. Yeah, most of the time, my understanding is when they did sacrifice all the different animals on the altars and things like that, they ate them. I mean, they didn't burn them up. There were certain parts of the animals that they would literally burn up. But most of the time, when the animals were sacrificed, the animals were eaten by the people.
Right. Now, I will point out, and I've said this before, and then it was kind of got a rebuttal. Um, I generally think that in the ancient world, um, I kind of think if the ancient world could see our meat eating patterns, I think they would be shocked, maybe covetous, but maybe appalled. I don't know, maybe of various different reactions. I think that there is so much meat consumption today, where it's like every meal we just got to have meat. We got to have a hamburger, then we got to have tacos, and we got to have a steak, then we got to have, it's got to be meat on the platter. And I don't think the ancients, unless that they were super stinking wealthy and there was some king, taking from people's uh, uh, barns, um, they were eating that much meat. I understand that the Levites were sacrificing all day, but we're talking about the temple. I mean, that's like, people would, for somebody to go and bring their sheep, their goat, their cattle, whatever, to have it sacrificed. That was a sacrifice. It was a big event, meaning you are never going to get produce from that animal again. You are losing your money in the future, so on and so forth. You're going to your sacrifice. Yeah, you're eating it, but that's not a daily occurrence. And also, you couldn't keep the meat for days at a time, only for 2 or 3 days, I think it was. So I don't think people were eating near as much as and yes, that the priests were, but there was also much more of a connection that there was a holy sacrifice as well. There was something very holy about it. It wasn't like a Levite just back there with a hamburger, just munching on it, at his break, whatever, pulling out of a paper bag. Just to say that, I just sometimes, um, I don't know. This is one of those things where people get so upset about. I just think that there's in the entire discussion, I feel like there's a huge disconnect on all sides from what seems to be happening in the ancient world. And almost anywhere, like there's nothing forbidding you in the Torah from killing your own animals, eating it. I just don't think it happened very often.
If I can interject. Oh, go
Sure.
ahead. Sorry.
Go, please do.
A couple things. My next door neighbor is an Ethiopian pastor, and it's their Christmas, and they brought me over to my door a plate of goat, and it was delicious. Also, nowhere in the conversation so far has anybody mentioned the new GMO meats and the clone meats. There are farms in the Midwest now that are growing salmon from clones, and also, coming up here very shortly, the meat is actually being done away with. So, we're going to be looking at this next generation where, you have products on the shelf already that are insect and laden. And, with the new laws where they don't have to show the ingredients, their whole, the New World Order has plans of making us do away with all meat. So the ethical and observant specifics of these questions that we'll need to answer and need to answer for our children and the world going forward, if it lasts that long, is how we react and what our positions are ethically on how we answer. Is it okay to eat clone meat, and or fish or poultry? Now even KFC for over decades has not been able to use the term chicken in their title because they grow these featherless, beakless bird type animals in a box in less than 30 days. So there's a lot going on that is going to come at us at such an exponentially fast pace that before we know it, the other day I was in the store, I saw filet mignon, for selling for over $50. So it's being phased out. So we might not be able to eat meat anyway. We might all be vegetarian, but the vegetables that we're getting are all GMO'd and cloned anyway.
Yeah, well, that's really disgusting what you said about KFC. I don't think I've eaten there in probably 10 years. But that's really disgusting about those chickens. And you're right about that. And I mean, they're putting in, the mRNA into cattle now,
Yes.
and the cattle are just like dropping over dead. But like when it comes to fish, we will only buy wild caught. We don't do the farm because we know. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to find anything like that. So yeah. I'm really close to going all out vegetarian, and in fact, we've made a conscious effort in our house to my wife, she still eats cattle, beef, and so on and so forth, but we're going like we try to make it very rare that we eat it. We're trying to go as vegetarian as possible.
For years now, I phased out red meat mostly. I don't not eat it out of any other reason. I started years ago phasing out red meat. I will still eat it, but it's a rare occurrence, and it's half a dozen times a year. I'm like you. I'll eat chicken or turkey or fish, and that's about it.
For one, you shouldn't be eating at fast food places anyways. They're like literally disgusting because of the meat that they do use. And as it was part of my point that I made earlier is that you have to source your meat locally and that you have to find yourself farmers who do husbandry on like a godly level, like that, to making sure you know where your food is coming from and not going to even if I do eat in a restaurant, I always ask them, where I don't go to restaurants that don't source their meats locally. And you always ask them, like, is the fish farmed? Like, you shouldn't eat farmed fish. And, just like Noel said, you should have wild caught. Like, there's a lot of benefits that come from eating even red meat. I think that there's, physically, I think that it is, and I'm not saying, like, I just think that everybody should make their own choice and where they feel, because I feel like lots of people can have a body type that want to be vegetarian and it's okay, but I'm totally not okay with the mass production of meat. I think that there are biblical guidelines that we have, and but even if we look at the Bible, even in some of the instances where they were slaughtering, like some of the times and some of these slaughters that they did for sacrifices, they were killing hundreds of thousands of animals. Like, if you read in First Kings, and that they were like, killing like 120 to 150,000 sheep and goats at a time. Like, that's a lot of animals when you really think about that. But they were being killed in the proper and cared for way that what Yahweh has called us to do. And I think that that's how we should be. If you are going to eat meat, then you should be looking for farmers and not going to the grocery stores and buying your meat from these mass produced things, because like this gentleman said earlier, you could be eating clone meat. You could be eating, you don't even know what you're getting at a grocery store, because we've been so far removed from living in cities, and that's why it's good to, even if you do live in a city, you have to get to know your local farmer.
Yeah, like what you had just mentioned with the fish. So we'll go to the grocery store, and we will only buy wild caught. And yeah, you pay a little bit more for it, but there are most weeks, especially with how spotty the grocery stores are now. We'll go there, and they will have no more wild caught left. It's only farm. We're not gonna. Well, I guess we're not eating fish this week, so we can go out and catch some, I guess, if we want, but we're not going to be buying it here. So we stick pretty strongly to that. And like I said, we're quickly. That's a discussion that we're having here in this house. Like with the stuff they're injecting into these animals now, we're so big on saying, well, we're not going to inject this into our bodies, but like, are we going to eat this if it's injected to others? Like, no, we're not going to do that. So the what we're eating is quickly changing in our household.
To answer my sister who spoke about food, that's one of the reasons we as a family and myself personally years ago stopped after the movie came out about Super Size Me, and that was a turning point for us. Plus, I don't know how many out there who know who Rabbi Finkelstein is, or have heard his YouTube, the YouTube broadcasts where he's admitting that the synagogue of Satan has sacrificed humans and ground them up and cut them up and been putting them in McDonald's food and feeding that to us for years. And there's a lot of proof out there that human DNA has been found uh, and randomly throughout the country in different McDonald's foods. So it's just all suspect. And then plus looking at going forward, I don't have a problem with eating meat, but I'm very careful about, I don't want to be taking in red meat. I that has high concentrations of injectables such as antibiotics and human growth hormones, because all those things pass down. So they're using that as the same agenda now to give the um, cattle and cows and animals the new mRNA strand, because we can secondarily now consume and become and ingest, mRNA DNA through animals the same way we glean them, the antibiotic weakenings through and you look at the history of our health and what it has done to us because of that. So the whole agenda going forward, just looking at it as a whole, you have to be really careful. And I've been going out of my way. I have 4 grown kids now that have kids of their own, and I'm doing my best to share as much information of the things that I'm learning about health wise for them. Fortunately for me, we did stop them off, years ago. Morgan Spurlock was Supersize Me. After we had them all see that movie, they agreed they didn't want to eat pink slime. So we didn't have a problem not feeding it to them anymore. So they became more health conscious about what they eat, excuse me, and what they feed to their kids now as well. Sorry, you still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
I dropped.
But if you live in an area that you have an opportunity to go knock on a farmer's door, like I always ask my local farmers, like, do you feed your animals antibiotics. And I mean, I kind of let's mostly kind of stay away from like mainstream. Like we would eat more wild meat, like moose or elk, and more of this the mainstream things that you could fill your freezer with. And I go to like have a local buffalo bison farmer that we would go, and bison don't need antibiotics and anything like that. And I think if you do kind of bit of research on, you can get red meat in other ways rather than having to eat an actual cow. But I think, wherever area I've ever moved in, I just knock on the farmer's door and just ask them and just kind of get to know the farmer. And even if you go to like a local fair or something, a lot of times these local farmers in these smaller communities will, be there kind of, you know, um, promoting their farm or whatever. If they have like lamb or something, and they'll say like, we don't feed anything to ours, it's all natural, it's organic, and you can come to the farm. And we actually even had a cow share when we were eating meat like cows, and I would purchase it into the cow share, and you could go to the farm and they actually killed the animal biblically, which I thought was pretty amazing. And so you don't really find that, but I think if you have these conversations with your farmer, and you can buy a half of a piece of a meat, then you know that even your ground beef is from one cow. There's a lot of problems too with some of these ground beefs that you're getting. They're mixed with like maybe 3 or 4 or even 10 other animals. But if you buy like a half of an animal or a whole animal at a time, you know that all your meat's going to be coming from one kind of source, and it's not going to be. I just think that there's ways that we can protect ourselves, that we can take the necessary steps, just like Noel had said, him and his wife, if there's no wild meat, well, they won't do it, because I think you have to be strict like that. You have to make sure that you're watching what we're putting into our bodies and not purchasing the GMO, even vegetables and fruits. You literally can't get away from it if you don't, like I said, I'm fortunate to live in an area where it's really abundant in fruits and vegetables, and we have such an abundance, and we can buy locally because there's so much abundance of that, where I know that not everybody has that opportunity. But at the same time, if you eat in the season and you're cognitive of what's being grown at that moment in time, and you're not like purchasing pineapple in the wintertime when your area doesn't even have pineapple or something like that. I think that, we live in certain areas for certain reasons. But anyways, I mean, I would never shame somebody or tell anybody they shouldn't eat it. I think that it is we're all on a journey, and it's each individual's own personal choice that they do make. And yeah, I just think that it's all up to us between in our relationship with God and how we walk this out.
I think you're very smart and very wise, and you're on the right track on that, and very good uh, advice as well. And you're fortunate to be able to do that. I'd like to run away and move to Montana and join the Yellowstone Ranch myself personally, but and become a cowboy. But we all can't do that here. I'm city dweller in Atlanta, and it's tough for me to know where our sources are coming from, because you can't even trust Whole Foods anymore now that they've allowed the selling and distribution of GMO fruits and vegetables. So we do still have some access to farm grown and raised. I have 5 chickens in my backyard, so yeah, we're thinking about raising uh, you know meat chickens instead of just layers. But the whole idea, though, of a generation, half a generation from now, it's most all of these things go bye-bye. And with how the government, like I said, is agreed to allow, and the FDA has allowed even country of origin. Here in Georgia, we have some of the largest chicken farms and ranches in the world. I don't know how you say that. We have Tyson and all these breeders that are huge, some of the largest in the world, but they now process all of their chickens in China. Go figure. So why? am I here in Georgia trying to buy chicken that's grown right up the road on Tyson Farms that they send all the way to China to process and send all the way back? That's because they inject it with ammonia and silicone, fatten it and plump it up and modify it and package it, and then they don't even have to put on their packaging country of origin, or country of origin still says America because it was grown here, but it was treated and modified, outside of the country, and they don't have to report that. So now I went on mission trips for years to Romania, and believe it or not, one of their biggest restaurants and one of their most popular there in Lagos and Timișoara and some of these places are KFC. But their KFC is different. Their chicken is real, and their chicken tastes like chicken used to taste, like when we were kids growing up before they started modifying them. So it's different. You taste real chicken, that's farm raised and range grown and or free range grown, and then it just tastes so much different than the bland, plumped up stuff that you would get in any fast food restaurant. That it's just not trustworthy. And now there's like I said, I think ethically what we're looking at is they're going to uh, you have these synthetic meats and fake meats, which are basically dog food and not worth ingesting. And now we have, excuse me, like I said, I think going forward, they're going to try to start. I think, just from a prophetic standpoint, I want to be wrong on this, but the coming economic shortages and our world currency changing, they're going to try to starve and lay siege, and they already are with the distributing nightmares. And you go into any supermarket and you start looking around on the shelves, what's available, what's not available, and how all prices have doubled, and you can't even afford to eat anything. And those that are not making anything over middle class wages, they can't afford, even if you have kids, to eat anything healthy because you're being priced right out of the market trying to put up with the new high costs of healthy foods. It's now for only the elite. That's my rant.
It was a good one, Dean. Well, guys, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for the night. You guys, of course, as you know, keep talking, have fun on here. Thank you for coming, everyone, and participating in this. And I'd love to hear from you guys. And you know what? Maybe I'll just stay on a few more minutes if you guys want to keep talking. But Josh, you can officially, if you're still recording, feel free to cut this. Thank you for hanging out. And yeah, so I'm signing out. I'll just hang here and listen to you guys talk a few minutes. But thank you again. Shabbat shalom one last time. Oh, this has been the after party, John. We've been at the after party for at least an hour now.